And now I must begin my quest to the center of the maze. Let's check out Ford's notebook. Alright, here I go. I expected enlightenment to be a little harder.
You fool! You have to go to the man's head.
Oh, okay, here I go. Man, that was super easy, barely an inconvenience. I mean, when I entered the maze, I saw the man's leg, so I headed towards that. And then there was only one way to go. As long as I didn't take that one left turn outward, there was no way I wasn't solving this thing.
I hate you, Chad.
And our episode begins with Bernard waking up and being distraught because Ford made him kill his girlfriend. Ford then does that movie thing that no one does in real life where he quotes literature from memory. This time it's Frankenstein, and eventually Bernard has enough of it. So I know I'm beating a dead horse here, but once again Bernard has changed outfits. This is what he was wearing when he killed Teresa. Well, yeah, duh, Ford had to dress Bernard for his new day of work. So who cleaned up the mess and dealt with Teresa's body? Well, I imagine Ford tasked his robotic family with that. You know, I would really like to see all these random little scenes in action. Lil Ford scrubbing brains off the wall, Ford's mom and dad carrying Teresa's body for hours to a ravine to dump it. That walk took all friggin' day for Stubbs and Elsie, so I imagine Ford's mom and dad are sprinting across Westworld with Teresa's body. Meanwhile, Ford has to undress Bernard, maybe give him a sponge bath, and then dress him in this three-piece suit. Anyway, Ford then tasks Bernard with disposing of all evidence of the murder and his relationship with Teresa, so he edits movements, camera feeds, and cleans his room. Oh, come on, let's be honest, this is an impossible task. Who hasn't found a random item of an ex months after a relationship ends? A hair, a bobby pin, a book, a sock. I mean, granted, it looks like they live in a hotel and have maid service every day, but that probably just makes everything worse as the maids have seen everything, especially stained sheets. Bernard deals with a few letters and a hair and he's done. Well, no one said he did a good job or was successful in finding everything. He just made an attempt to eliminate all signs of Teresa. Ford only needs everything to hold together for a few more days. We then get back to Maeve, who meets Clementine, remembers her daughter again, and then kills herself again. This is, by the way, at least the 6th time Maeve has killed herself since being decommissioned. Remember, after being decommissioned and saved by Elsie, she wakes up during surgery and is put back into Westworld, and then she kills herself with Hector. Then she dies and comes in a second time to scare Felix. Then she dies and wakes up with the bird. Then she gets choked, and then she kills herself in order to try to save Clementine. So Maeve is a host working in the busiest and most monitored place in the park and has already been flagged for decommission after freezing up and being aggressive towards a guest. But no one has noticed that Maeve has died 6 times in the span of what? A week? 10 days? Anyway, Maeve wants to escape and Sylvester says go for it, and then she remembers that Sylvester told her that her C6 vertebrae has a bomb in it. Actually, previously he said her skin was keeping her in the park, but I guess he changed his mind. Maeve is going to need a complete rebuild to remove the vertebrae, and she needs to recruit an army. We then get back to William and Dolores on their journey into the mysterious, unclaimed territory. Dolores says she remembers this area, which means she was here in a previous build, so she was either breaking her loop before William, or she was just allowed to wander really far from Escalante. The two find a bunch of dead Confederados who are conveniently killed by Ghost Nation. Luckily, Ghost Nation doesn't kill Dolores whenever she wanders out of her loop, which seems to be all the time according to Stubbs. Dolores then goes to get some water for a dying soldier and seems to flash back to a previous loop. Or maybe it's a flash forward to modern Dolores, or maybe she's hallucinating, the fuck if I know. Whatever the case, she sees herself dead in the river. Well, actually, Brandon, this proves that Ghost Nation does occasionally kill Dolores. If she's flashing back to a previous build, at some point she died in that river. Yeah, I guess so. I don't know why she'd be looking at herself, though. Her memory should be of brown running water. We then get to Teresa's dead body, which was found by security in a ravine. Stubbs tells us that the park's medical and red teams found that she had broken her neck after a fall when trying to smuggle out data. Whoa. Medical and red team? Aren't there, police in this world? Maybe a local coroner? Aren't they going to do an investigation? Is Westworld just above the law here? Some corporate medical dude can do autopsies? That seems way sketchy. And, I only have the most basic CSI knowledge, but Teresa was killed and then several hours later must have been dumped in the ravine. Shouldn't rigor mortis have set in, ruining any chance of staging the fall? Well, I mean, we have no idea the medical abilities of Ford or Ford's mom and dad. They might have done stuff. Medical stuff to the body. Anyway, Ford then lets Charlotte and Stubbs know that it was Teresa who staged the Clementine incident, and so Bernard will be rehired and QA depowered. And he does it all with a ha-ha, I'm obviously guilty of murder face. And Charlotte responds with a, yeah, I know you're obviously guilty of murder face. And Stubbs looks on with a, these people are awfully suspicious, both of them could have committed murder, but I'm not going to do anything because I'm the most incompetent worker at Westworld face. And so then we get to Felix and Sylvester, who are panicking because there's an investigation surrounding the Teresa incident. And then Maeve tells us that she's been researching her code and she wants to know who Arnold is. Of course, earlier in the season with Bernard, we found out that the computer knows exactly who Arnold is. He's the builder of early hosts. But Maeve couldn't find that information, it seems. Now, it's never really explained, but Maeve wants an advanced system change, and so she needs to go to behavior. I assume it's to give her the ability to control other hosts. Wait a minute, I thought she could control other hosts before. Isn't that the whole point of the bird incident? That she could control them? I guess that bird just randomly flew on her finger. It might also be the ability to hurt people. Didn't she have that ability when she first woke up? She might have been pretending. Felix and Sylvester then go outside and discuss whether they're going to do this, and Sylvester comes up with the most incredible plan that they should have just done days ago. When she's asleep, bash her head in. Ah, regrets. Meanwhile, back with the Man in Black's quest of nonsense, Teddy lets him know that they've arrived in Wyatt's land, even though Wyatt's land was the mountains outside of Sweetwater. Anyway, Teddy then starts remembering past builds before the two come upon some dead bodies in the middle of nowhere and Angela. They are attacked by a large masked man resembling a minotaur, and we get a bit of symbolism. In Greek mythology, the minotaur was at the heart of the maze that Theseus ventures through. The Man in Black at first begins to strangle the minotaur, as Theseus did, but in the end, it's Teddy who slays the minotaur. Of course, we are told repeatedly that the maze isn't for the Man in Black, it's for the hosts. Teddy slays the minotaur as he's the one who's solving the maze and finding consciousness. Teddy then decides to knock out and capture the Man in Black. We then get to Felix and Sylvester, who have somehow found some behavior outfits that everyone besides Elsie and Bernard have to wear for some reason, and then Maeve makes her changes and needs a reboot. When she appears to be out, Sylvester wants to proceed on breaking her. We then get to Lee, who is working on a narrative, when Charlotte pays him a visit. We get a little Easter egg of the Wyatt storyline in the background. We see the Minotaur, Angela, and the man who is tied to the tree that Teddy finds. Charlotte lets Lee know that he's been only given busy work and offers him a real job. We then get to Maeve, who reveals that she worked around the system and never needed to be shut down, apparently. She shows off her ability to hurt humans, which she may or may not have had already, and cuts Sylvester. Felix is horrified and naively thought Maeve wasn't going to hurt anyone, and then he's ordered to save Sylvester's life. We then get back to Maeve topside, who reveals that she can control hosts and orders the bartender to erase her tab. She remembers her daughter again and then begins her plan. As Hector begins his robbery, Maeve orders Clementine and the sheriff and other hosts out of their loops. Law enforcement is mostly neutralized, thus allowing Hector to make off with his safe. Now wait a minute, we've seen the safe robbery go down a couple times, and each time it's a heavily monitored event. No one noticed all these hosts going crazy and killing themselves? What is Stubbs up to? He is so clearly the most incompetent person in Westworld. Well, he's probably distraught over Teresa and isn't paying attention. Anyway, we then get back to Bernard and Ford, and Bernard wants to know why he was given pain, and Ford says that all stories need a beginning. Bernard then asks if his pain and consciousness is any different from humans, and Ford says no, not really. And finally, Bernard asks if he's ever been ordered to kill before. Ford says no, and then Bernard remembers dealing with Elsie right before getting his memory erased. We then get to William and Dolores, who have abandoned their horse for some reason, as they make it to Escalante. Dolores then flashes back and we meet all of our crazy friends like Angela and Maeve and Armistice and Lawrence's daughter. The memory goes south and people start dying, and then Dolores decides to shoot herself in the head. She tries to do this in the 30 years ago timeline, but William ends up saving her. This makes me think, if Dolores has been doing this trip before William, as the painting implies, and after William a whole bunch, enough that Stubbs thinks Dolores going out of her loop is a regular thing, then there must be several times that Dolores made it all the way to Escalante and shot herself in the head. Shouldn't the cleanup people have been massively confused why Dolores had been traveling for days and days to this buried town and then committed suicide? In 35 years, this issue was never brought up. Anyway, it's too bad that Dolores and William ended up dumping their horse for no reason because the Confederados find them and they are led by Logan, with no explanation for this turn of events ever given. So next, Lee and Charlotte go down to basement 83, and Charlotte decides to upload a massive amount of information into Abernathy's brain, as it can hold more information than a single drive. Holy crap, this scene is bonkers. First of all, it was established in the first episode that intruders in basement 83 leads to a fully armed security team coming down. I already told you, Stubbs is reeling from Teresa's death. He's distracted. Fine, I'm then supposed to believe that of all the hosts, she picks Abernathy by chance? By chance, or was he chosen? We don't know at this point. Okay, and Charlotte wants to put Abernathy on a train out. We established in this episode that the hosts have an explosive in vertebrae C6. Maybe Charlotte doesn't know that. And Sylvester does? Alright. And finally, I'm supposed to believe that a host brain holds more than a single drive. Why not just make a drive the size of a host brain? Wouldn't that hold the same amount? Charlotte could then just put it in her luggage. Alright, you got me on that one. We then get one of the most unintentionally hilarious scenes in the entire series that really displays so very, very much about the Stubbs character and pretty much explains why this whole organization is a shit show. So here Stubbs decides to give his condolences to Bernard about Teresa's death. Stubbs was not only aware of their affair, but says it's his job to know about these things. First of all, is it? Because I thought Stubbs' job was security, and here's a list of things he didn't know about. Unregistered hosts wandering the park, hosts acting as technicians, Ford planting unregistered weapons in the park, hosts drawing pictures and carving figurines of technicians, hosts breaking their loops for days at a time, Ford speaking to hosts of interest and then placing them in places that are not in their loop, an unregistered relay station in the park that can command hosts, a sex ring going on in livestock, a rogue host wandering the building, giving herself upgrades and removing her safeties, Ford physically threatening Teresa, Teresa trying to smuggle information out with the woodcutter, Teresa trying to cover up the woodcutter incident, Teresa and Charlotte trying to frame an employee, Teresa being murdered, Elsie either being kidnapped or murdered, and Charlotte and Lee going down to basement 83 and conspiring to steal information. And it's not that these are difficult things to prevent. Actually monitoring what you're supposed to be monitoring and implementing doors with keycard access would have prevented half of these. Instead, Stubbs seems to be worried about who's fucking. Now normally I'd say who cares about who's fucking whom, but here's the thing. The head of QA and the head of behavior being in a relationship is a massive conflict of interest. If Stubbs knew about this, and this was really part of his job, why didn't he report it? That is really the most unforgivable thing. If trying to figure out conflicts of interest is part of your job, then when you discover one, you have to act on it. Anyway, because Bernard's memory was erased, he says he doesn't know what Stubbs is talking about, which is another enormous red flag that Stubbs never acts on. We then get back to Teddy and the Man in Black, and the Man in Black tells his mysterious backstory. He is a titan of industry and a philanthropist, but after 30 years of marriage, his wife committed suicide. His daughter then claimed that it was because of him. He acted like a good guy, but his daughter claimed that his wife could see the monster underneath and it scared her. And so the Man in Black decides he wants to try something really evil to see if his daughter was right. And so he goes to kill Maeve and her daughter at the homestead to see if he feels anything. He feels nothing. But then Maeve, still clinging to life, crawls out to the maze written in the dirt and dies. And so now the Man in Black is searching for the maze, Arnold's game, and Wyatt, because it's a game where consequences matter. I'm sorry, does anything about the Man in Black's story make any sense at all? First of all, after 30 years, the wife commits suicide for fear that the Man in Black might explode? That's a really bizarre motive. You'd think that she'd become more confident that he wouldn't explode over the course of 30 years based on the fact that, I don't know, he hasn't exploded for 30 years. But even if she thinks that he is going to explode, why not just divorce him? We know Juliet's family is well-to-do. She doesn't need the Man in Black financially. But okay, let's just chalk up this crazy part of the story to a suffering daughter saying hurtful things. But where is the logic in the Man in Black's actions? He's accused of being a monster, so to prove his daughter wrong, he decides to act monstrous by smashing robots. Everybody believes robots aren't alive. Go kill a puppy or something. Plus, the Man in Black has already done horrific stuff to robots. Remember that time he mutilated all of those Confederados? Okay, but fine, let's just buy that first part. Tell me this, how does the question of whether or not one is an unfeeling psychopath lead to wanting a story with real consequences? These are two completely unrelated concepts. The man in black was already living a life with real consequences. Heavy consequences. Consequences that led to his wife friggin' killing herself. How does any of this lead to caring about whether or not robot cowboys can hurt you? And this is all on top of the ridiculousness of thinking that finding Wyatt, which is Ford's story, will lead to the maze, which is Arnold's story. We then get to Maeve, who decides she wants to get out of town. Clementine tries to stop her, Maeve has a flashback to the man in black, and then she kills Clementine. The police come in, and so Maeve tries to order bystanders to create a distraction. Security finally notices that Maeve isn't responding to commands, and so they send technicians in to pick her up. We then get a bit of Maeve's backstory and find out that the Man in Black incident really screwed her up. Even after Ford erases her memory, the trauma causes her to remember past builds, and she kills herself. Okay, so if it's the Man in Black who triggered her remembering past builds, and it's her programming that's causing her to wake up and want to escape, what's the point of the Violent Delights incident? I don't know, maybe program activation? But we already know that Ford can send commands to hosts remotely from the theater. Not to mention, he seems to have the ability to have hosts just taken to him discreetly. Anyway, Maeve is picked up by the technicians, and then we get back to Teddy and the Man in Black. Teddy considers killing the Man in Black, and then Angela decides to stab Teddy and capture him so she can bring him to Wyatt, even though Wyatt's men already captured Teddy before and tied him to a tree. We close the episode with Wyatt's masked men closing in.
And so now I have for you a second maze, the tarot card maze.
You do realize that's not solvable, right? I mean, if I enter the thing, I almost immediately get stuck in his legs or his side.
God damn it, I paid an artist like $200 for this on Etsy.